Okay, so welcome everyone, as I said, to the second in our spring webinar series. Nick Olson from PredictWind is here today, and I asked him to do something a little bit different than what we've done in the past, which was essentially to show us how to use the tool set for a specific voyage. In this case, I propose that since a number of you may be down south and heading north, that you're coming from the US Virgin Islands and heading up towards the Chesapeake. So Nick's going to go through the process of what you do before you leave and what you should be doing while you're underway. And rather than say any more, I'm going to pass the baton over to Nick and take it away.
Thanks very much, Alex, and thanks everyone for coming along this morning. Well, it's morning for me, it's probably evening for you guys. I did just mention to Alex, we're an hour earlier for me. We've just, our daylight savings has just ended. So I'll warm up as we go. And yeah, but anyway, thank you for taking the time to come along. So yeah, I think we'll cover off three main things. So we'll have a real brief look at departure planning, because that's something that we should always look at before we embark on a passage and take some time to look at our weather window. And then we will jump out, and so we'll do that in the PredictWind forecast site, and which you can also do in the PredictWind app, and you can also do it in the offshore app. But we'll do it in the forecast website, because there's other stuff that we can do in there, such as looking at our polars. And then we will jump over to the offshore app, and we will download all the data that we want to get before we leave. And then we will look at doing a download while underway, and how that sort of changes from what we got when we left, and then when we're on our low bandwidth connection. So we'll just crack right into it, and I'll try and find the right screen. This is what happens when you have too many tabs open on your computer. Hold on, I can see the offshore app. Oh yeah, it always confuses me because the last thing I ever open up in Chrome is Zoom before I come in here. So it always confuses me which screen I'm looking at. So I'm actually in New Zealand, but everything else I've got is over in the US. So before we do anything, we really need to, this is what I would like to do, is come in here and just look at a map with a large scale, and zoom out so that we can actually see what's happening in wherever we are in the world. And you can see here in New Zealand, at this time of the year, we have these lows rolling around the Southern Ocean. And as we go into our winter, they actually start coming up through the Tasman here, and which has a massive effect on our winter weather. So, and the reason I'm saying that is that we want to just look at the big picture and see what's going on in the next period. The last thing we want to do is go sailing to a schedule, and we want to sail to the schedule of the weather, and that's our sort of our first step in how we're going to keep safe at sea. So I'm just going to come down here to tools, and we're going to open up. So I came here to tools and then departure planning, and you'll see I've got my my route already set up, where I want to start from and where I want to end up. So I've got my green start waypoint and my red destination waypoint. And I'm not going to, and so before we do that, I'm sure that I've mentioned this many times, but we need to set up our polars. I've decided today that I've got a Lagoon 52. And if you if you don't know about polars, please ask our support desk. We've got tutorials on it. And yeah, really important to set your performance polars up to fit your boat. But I'm sure I've talked about it lots of times, so I'm not going to go into that again. And you'll see here, I can select which forecast models, because at the moment I can only compare 2 models for my departure time. So I'll choose the GFS and the ECMWF. Very shortly, we'll be making a change and you'll actually be able to compare 4 at once, which will be nice. And so you could have Spire and UKMO and ECMWF and GFS and compare all 4 of those departure times. Just need to move my zoom controls. So I'll just click over here. So I've selected which models I'm going to use, and I'll come back here to departure planning and move my zoom controls once again. And I will click on download. And so what it's going to do now is it's going to compare 4 departure times for me. And so whether one was now, I can actually set that for the future. I could have come up here and clicked on that little time button up the top here and changed the start time, and also changed the period in between. So, but because I just chose the default, it's going to calculate if I left now, if I left tomorrow, 24 hours time, 48 hours, 36, and so on. So, and it's going to show me what my route would look like if I left at all those times. So this is, we could do this step and then we could go back to our maps and just have a look at the situation beyond that. Once we, if there's a time that we thought was suitable, a potential suitable time to leave in the next 4 days. So it's calculated my 4 departure times, but really what we don't look at the map too much with this tool. Like, yeah, we can see, okay, we're not about to sail into a cyclone or hurricane. But really the tool that we want to look at here is in the tables. And I'll just move my zoom controls again. And you can see here that, so I've got departure 1, departure 2, departure 3, and departure 4. And I've got the dates. So you can see here it's 8 o'clock in the morning for me, 10 past 8. And so I did that as now. So there was one departure here, departure 1 is now, and then tomorrow, next day. And so for each of these, the reason that we're in here, the reason we're looking at these tables is that we really want to just see what the conditions are across that route. And the easiest way to see them is to come and have a look in these tables, in the summary. So we've got the passage time, and you can see across all of those days, it's not wildly different. We've got our maximum wind speed. So that's our maximum average wind speed. So that's not including gusts. So that's something that we might want to be aware of with our planning. So this, if we leave on this 3rd day, for instance, in the ECMWF, we've got an average of 30 knots. So where that is in the route, we would actually have to go and have a look at the weather routing. We'd have to run the weather routing starting on the 10th of April at 8 in the morning and have a look at where we get that 30 knots. Is it for a long, how long is it for? Where is it? All that sort of thing. But you can see here on and it's the same with, day 4. So if we leave, if we left today or we left tomorrow, you can see our max wind speed doesn't get up too much. Obviously, we want to look at the bottom end as well. Is it going to be a trip of motoring and our averages? So for us, people that want to go cruising, we generally don't want to sail upwind, and all of these look reasonable in that respect. We've got all of the models and all of the departures have a pretty big amount of our time spent sailing, reaching or downwind. So you can see we've got little bits of upwind here, but not a lot. And then there's the percentages of time that we're in these breezes. So from this, we can look through all this data and go, all right, when do I want to leave? And, at first glance, none of these seem particularly nasty to me. It's always good when your boss tries to call you while you're doing a webinar. Anyway, so we can choose one of these days to go and have a better look. So, maybe let's choose tomorrow, because it looks like a pretty reasonable route. I mean, personally, I wouldn't be too worried about the 30 knots, but we don't need to push it if we don't want to. The other thing here is that in these later routes, we do actually get up into the 3-4 meter area. So they're definitely going to be a bit rougher. So, we might not want to leave at those times. So we've got some idea of when we might depart. And as I say, you can do this, further and further ahead. Do need to remember that the actual model runs are only going to go out to 10 days. So as soon as you start looking too far ahead for a passage like this, the end of your route will be calculated using the ECMWF ensemble modeling. So that's an average, I think, of 52 models. And so it looks quite, it doesn't have a lot of features in it. So you just want to be aware that if your route is that you're calculating is going beyond that 10 days, that beyond the 10 days from now, it is using the ensemble data. So great for, being able to sort of look in the distance, but I'm just putting that in context, that because it's averaging out so many models, it actually averages out lots of weather features. So something to keep in mind. So obviously there's a lot to look at before we leave, but anyway, we're gonna say that we're going to depart tomorrow. So everything that we do from now on, we will be pretending that we're going to depart tomorrow morning. So 24 hours from now. So I'll stop sharing this screen and I will share another one. So I have changed over to the offshore app. If you are unfamiliar with what that is, this is the piece of software that we use whenever we're out of cell phone range, basically. Everything you do in here will get saved for when you're offline. So, and the same with when you're on your satellite connection or your SSB, you can download your data into here, and it's only connected for that period of time that you're doing that download, then it disconnects, and then everything is saved into the software. So you can use that on your Mac, your PC, your laptop if you have a laptop on board, your iPad and iPhone, your Android tablet or Android phone. I think if you're going offshore and you want to be able to see all this weather and analyze it, I think you definitely want to be on a bigger screen, because looking at weather, the bigger your screen, then you can see easier. Trying to do weather routing and whatnot on your phone can be a bit hard. It is nice to have it on your phone, but yeah, not everything. So again, so we've got our same route set in here. It actually transfers across. I downloaded this before we left, before I started the webinar, but we'll come in here and we'll relook at it. So because we have, let's pretend we have a good cellular-based connection, or we've got some data at the marina or wherever we are, we're going to assume that the internet connection's as good as the one I have here. And so this is what we're going to do before we leave. And I think we would do a lot more analysis on our departure time than what we have, but I don't really want to turn this into a full departure planning webinar. I think we just, people are probably more interested in seeing how we might use the tools. So we've got our start and our finish up here. And if I just come over here and I click on this grid button, and so up on this left-hand side, I clicked on grid, and you can see here, if I move this start waypoint around, that actually changes this grid area. And so that'll automatically set it, but I can actually change this grid area by grabbing one of the corners. And so what I can do before I leave, I can actually get, you know, quite a big area. When I'm at sea, I might need to reduce this area down to, you know, to make it fit for a file size suitable for my satellite connection. So I can move that grid area around, and then I can come over here and I can click on download. I'll just cancel that. If we want to get, you know, accurate with it, where our waypoints are, I can click on this button up here, this waypoints icon, and I can enter my lat long in here. You'll see if I move this, that my lat long is changing there. And so you can actually type that in, you know, and away you go. It'll sit in that position. So we've got that there. I'll just move my grid area again, and we'll come back to that again later, the grid area. And so then I'll come down here and click on download. So if you're on your iPad, for instance, it's a green down arrow. So lots of the stuff that we do here, it does have a slightly different layout, but I'll try and explain what the button is if you're on your iPad or your tablet as we go. So you'd click on that download arrow, and then we can come in here and we can get our grid data. So this is just the weather models and our time steps. And you see here, I've got this set for 3 hours. I've got 10 days and I'm 50K resolution. I could switch this over and get the highest resolution available. And so I would do that if I, you know, for my planning before I left. Oh, actually, let's just leave that on. And so what we're doing there is actually getting the highest resolution that we can for every model, so to view as a grid. So we're getting the PWG and the PWE. Some of the stuff that we're getting there will be 1 kilometer resolution, and then 8K, and then 50K once we're out at sea. ECMWF will be 9K resolution the whole way. UKMO is 15, and Spire, I think, is 12. GFS is 27. If you see people saying that they've got the 13K GFS model, that is somewhat true, but the actual output of the GFS is 27. The model, they do run it at 13, but the output is 27. So you can see here, I've got all my parameters. I'm getting everything because I'm on land. I've got a good connection, and away I go. So see here, we've got I can have my start time as now or in the future. So I'll change that to 9 because we're going to leave tomorrow morning. And yes, I have my date set up differently to you. And so anyway, we've got our departure time set for tomorrow. I can come in here and I can adjust things if I want to. I'm going to turn my motoring settings on. So these are, on the iPad, these would be weather routing preferences, would be the button you press on. And so I'm going to turn my motoring on. I'm going to motor at 6 knots when the boat speed is less than 5 knots. I've got my polar set there. I could change that, and the polar speed adjustment. So you see, I'm happy with my polar for upwind, downwind, and then at night I'm going to have it at 90% so that I'm just sailing at night's harder, and I might reduce my sail or whatever, but I'm just going to have that set at 90%. So I've got my depth avoidance, which is nice for making the router not go across areas that you don't want to. I'll change it to 5 meters. You know, you can put that to 10, 20, whatever you like, and it will use a depth contour from CMAP to the router won't go into those areas. Down the bottom here, we have our advanced routing adjustments, and you see I've got a true wind speed scale factor there. So some people like to move that up to, say, 110%. The reason that you would do that is, you know, we sometimes hear, oh, your forecast's always 5 knots below or whatever, something like that. And I think that generally what's going on there is that people don't realize that the grids that we look at are in the wind maps are averages. So obviously it's the average wind speed. Your gusts can be 40% higher. So obviously you get anything above 12 knots, you're probably going to get gusting. So that's why. And so therefore you could actually scale that up to 110%, which might, lots of racing sailors do it because they think it gives them a more accurate representation of what they're seeing. It will only change it for the routes. It won't change the grids. Anyway, I'm going to leave that as it is because I'm not a believer in changing that stuff. I'll just look at the gusts and just work that out. So I'll just close this here. So I'll just click on this here. So comfort settings. Comfort settings will try and avoid nasty weather. I'm not a super fan of them myself. Some people love it, but you just need to be aware that the router will try and cart you all over the ocean to avoid those conditions. So if you make those conditions, you know, if you put them really low, it will cart you all over the ocean to get there. So you might be at sea a long time just to avoid, you know, some swells, which can be pretty hard to avoid. So I'd rather just look at the route and then make any adjustments I wanted. You know, if we depart at the right time and we get our weather window right, we shouldn't be really needing to look at using that tool. So I'll just close that there. So we're happy with all of this. GMDSS, we want to get that. That's our forecast written by a meteorologist for the local Met area. And it basically just gives us our warnings of any nasties. Observations, I know for a fact that my area I've got is too big and that it'll throw an error. If you want to get observations, you need to have quite a small area because it ends up with a huge amount of data in there that actually locks up the software. So especially down the coast of the US. So we are going to get the ocean data. You'll see here, if I turn that off, changes the file size a lot. And you see I've got a massive file size here. There's a lot of data. Satellite imagery, GPS tracking, I want to see where everyone is. I've got no idea what GPS tracking I've got set up in my account, so that could be exciting. Anyway, I will click on next. And yeah, my area is too big for that model. It didn't like that. And you'll see here, yeah, so I've got all of these are too big. So I'm going to come back here and I'm actually going to adjust this area. To better fit it. And I'll click on download again, next, and we'll see if we get any errors. So there's no errors there. It doesn't think that everything I've got is too big. And we will press, I've clicked on download all, and so it's going to give us all this data. It's going to download the data. You can see here I'm getting some really big files. You know, they're pretty large. You know, 12 megabytes, 32, 40. So yeah, lots of data there. And this is probably a really good time to sort of explain what's going on with the weather route here. So the weather route is calculating, you know, our route, and it's using all of this highest resolution available data. So it's using the ECMWF 9K, it's using the ECMWF 14K wave, the Spire, UKMO, it's using all that high resolution data. And you can see here how big these files are. And so that's what's really clever about the weather route, is that it sends off this tiny little, you'll see here, that was 20 kilobytes for our weather route. So it's sent off that little piece of information to our servers, and it's crunched those weather routes using huge amounts of data, which means that we're going to get a better weather route, more accurate and better information in there. But at sea, on our satellite connection, we would not be downloading grid files that are this big. It's just not going to happen for you. Even if you had a high-speed connection, you would not be wanting to get this amount of data. You can see all these high-resolution 1K areas that I've got there, the SST, and so I'll explain in a bit why I got the SST. And so we've got all this, these global currents that we're downloading. And the reason we want to get these now is that these will actually, these currents, we will use them later on. They will stay loaded in our software for while we're underway, because again, we can't download those grids while we're underway. Our weather routing will be calculating our routes using the current models, but we couldn't download them. But because they're ocean data, the current models don't change massively, over consecutive days compared to the atmospheric data. So our wind data, we need to get that after every model run, but our ocean currents don't change super quick. So I think we've got everything there. You'll see that we've got these ticks down here. We've downloaded a lot of data, and obviously I did that on my web connection. So I'll just click on close there. So we decided that we wanted to leave tomorrow, so in 24 hours time. And you'll see here, this is for my entire weather route. I have my wind speed. You'll see here towards the end of our trip, we do get some higher winds. And so, we'll have more of a look at that soon, and our wind directions and wind angles and whatnot. And so you see here at the end of this trip as well, we're getting, we've got some rain, we've got some cape, and the temperature drops. So yeah, we want to have a look at what's going on at the end of the route there, and just see, especially with our cape, we might, it's probably something we're just going to live with and keep an eye on, and keep updating as we go. But first thing that sort of catches my eye there. So we've downloaded all of this data. We've got, everything that we can see here we'll actually be able to download when we are offshore. So we won't spend too much time on it. We can come back to that, and I will just move my tools. So you'll see here, we've got our map, and we've got, just zoom out, we've got all of our weather routes. So all of these different colors here are our weather routes. I can come here, and what are we on? We're on PWG. So it's gone into the high resolution model there. And it's showing us the blue route. So we're in PWG, so we're in blue. If I come over here down to this little box down the bottom right hand side, I can change my weather model. So we'll flick over to the ECMWF, and so we're looking at we downloaded the ECMWF 9-kilometer resolution grid, so which is pretty cool to have this high resolution grid for our entire route that we can look at and analyze. And we've got our departure time. So you'll see here, if I move this time slider, so this is from when the model was run this morning, my time. The time on your the software shows is based on your computer time. So you'll see here, I put in, I think we were leaving tomorrow morning, and so you'll see that we start moving tomorrow morning on the routes, and so all of the boats start moving. And so, but the one we're looking at here is the black route, which is the ECMWF, and you'll see the other dots are all moving at the same time, and that's just indicating to us where we would be on the weather route and the other models. This background map here is the ECMWF. And so that's what, as we move this boat in time, that is what we're looking at. And you'll see here, we go through this band here. And so we'll flick over to the other models, to the other parameters in a second and have a look at that. And so the other interesting thing to note here is that we have got 5 weather models that think that we should do this. And we've got this one weather model that thinks that we should take a very different route. So the easiest way to interpret this is that, we've got the consensus between the 5. But we might want to try and work out what it is that's going on differently in this weather model that it wants us to go that way, which seems counterintuitive to me. Don't know whether that's the route I would want to take. I like the fact that we have that consensus between all the others. And you see there we run out of grub time in the UKMO. So it's UKMO that wants us to take this alternative route. I suspect it's using our motoring settings as we go through the middle of that high pressure there. So I'll flick back to the ECMWF. So with all the models and all the routes, we want to look for the consensus. And to me, this is an easy decision. We've got a bunch of models saying to do the same thing. And so we run we can just quickly scroll this through because, we're still looking at our departure, right? And so there's nothing too bad here. This looks like it gets pretty windy up here. That's 27 knots. It is behind us, but are we going to be in the Gulf Stream with 27 knots? We can have a look at that. And the good thing is that it's coming from behind us and it's heading north, which is the same as what the current will be doing. So I'll just flick over to the ocean data so we can look at that. It's gone too far forward, have I? So we're right at the edge of our grid time there. So, but you'll see that we will be entering the Gulf Stream, in those strong winds. So this might be something that we want to think about. I mean, you've got the current and the wind going the same way. So that's a positive, but it's definitely, 30 knots average. Let's go back to our weather routing and let's change to gusts. So you'll see here, we've got, we know that the Gulf Stream's running through here and we've got 27 to 35 knots. It could be pretty gnarly. Interesting. Would we be better off leaving later? No. Would we maybe have been better off leaving earlier? Should we have left today? Still looks like it would be pretty windy through there, but it would have been better if we'd left earlier. So, if we were going through here, still 23 to 29 knots, but we would have been better probably if we'd left earlier for this back end of the trip. The other thing here is that we wouldn't, if we had a problem and we were delayed or that we went slower than expected, we might run into, we might end up in this. And so this is why we really need to really think about our departure time and what happens, if we are delayed and whatnot. So you can see here that we get this nasty frontal band comes off here. And how do I know that? Is because I can see the change in the wind there. But if we come over here and look at the rain, this is how we see when we get these changes. And so we've got the rain there. The rain is our indicator of our frontal band. That actually looks pretty nasty to me. And I think I saw something down here as well when we started our route. We had that change. So you see here, we have that first change from we have our southeasterly here, and then we come into having a sort of a west northwest as we go through after this change. So we have that rain band there, and we can see what's going on with that. And so that's cool. We know what's going to happen there. We might just want to have a look at the CAPE, which is the convective available potential energy. And we can see that front there, it doesn't appear to have too much of a bang to it. So that one's fine. But if we come up here and we look at this other one that's, near the end of our journey, we can see that as that comes through, that there is a bit of activity in there. I mean, I would be considering whether I wanted to leave at this time, given that I'm probably going to end up in something pretty nasty in this piece of water here. And I don't know whether that's a piece of water I'd want to be in, given I've got a front that's potentially going to hit me. I've got CAPE. It's not super high levels of CAPE, but they're in there. There's CAPE. There is elevated CAPE levels in that band of that frontal band. We've got heavy rain. Yeah, and we've got the Gulf Stream to contend with. So you've got a bunch of factors there that I don't particularly like. So this is why we have the tools. This is why you can look at it, and this is why you do your analysis about when you're going to leave. We probably should have left yesterday. So I won't labor on that too much more. So the other thing we can look at and analyze is the DSS forecast. You can come in here and you can have a look and work out which part of the world you're in and just see if there's any warnings. For instance, 30-hour forecast, cold front, Straits of Florida, tells you some stuff that's going on. Just close that. And I was going to mention before why I got the SST data. So we have 3 different current models here. So if I come right back to here, and you'll see I can look at the different models. So we have the RTOFS, the Mercator, and the HICOM. So if I were to go to now, and so you'll see these two will be quite different. So yeah, they're not miles different. About the HICOM. Yeah, slightly different, but not massively. Probably more the eddies, the placement of these eddies are different. Something that we can do to sort of validate what we think about it is that we can go and have a look at the sea temperature map, which is a composite image from a satellite. And you'll see here it's 35 hours old. So it is actually relatively old data. So that must be updating shortly. But what we can do is just have a look at this, look at the sea temp, and then compare it to our ocean current models. And it gives us some indication of which model is actually doing the best job now. So that might help us decide which one is going to be the most accurate for this particular time, looking at the Gulf Stream and these eddies, which, can really throw up some pretty interesting weather, sea states, sorry. Okay, so let's move on. So we have, let's say that we're underway. We left yesterday or 2 days ago, and we decided that we'd follow this route, and we've made some good ground. I could put in my start position from my my chart plotter, and we're up here, and when we would have got a weather out here, here, and here. So every 12 hours we would have got a weather out, and now we're here, and we'll just quickly sort of look at how we want to get this weather while we're, while we're on our satellite connection. So I know from before that we had, we had a really big files, and this is still quite a large area. And so there's two things we can do here. So we want to look at our immediate weather. So what we're going to get in the next day and next 3 days. And so we could actually bring this area down quite small to look at, where we're expecting to go, and and have a file size that is small enough, excuse me, to use while we just have a drink of my coffee. Cold coffee. So to look at this this area. So, and you might be like, oh well, I want to look at a really big area, and that's fine, you can. So there's two things we would do here. So this is, I would get this small area and run my weather out. My weather out's going to give me the weather for the whole journey, the whole passage. So I'm still getting all that data. I can still look at what's going to happen in the, in 5 days time. But I can get this grid area for my immediate, 1 to 3 day forecast. What I can do after I've run this one is I can come back and I can get a much bigger area, but I would change the parameters that I'm going to download. So we'll go into that now. So let's say we want this smaller area. Come in here, click on download. So this is where I need to start thinking about my file size. So I'm just going to make this much easier for us to see, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn off the ocean data. So we've got our ocean data. It is too big to download ocean data gribs on a normal satellite connection. You could get them on a high-speed satellite connection, but they're still big files. It's a lot of data. So, but you'll see here, I've already reduced that file size way down. I'll just click back. And so we need to change all of these settings to work on our satellite connection. And so the reason that we can do it this way and look at it this way is that our weather routing is using that highest resolution available data. So it's all that data that we downloaded before, all those high resolution grids, all that stuff, that's what our weather routing's using. That's using the latest ocean data. So that's, and we know that that's going to only be a 18 kilobyte file. So we need to change our grid time step. So that's the actual steps between the grid model parameters. The software will interpolate them. Actually does a pretty good job of doing that. If, it says if it's going to be 10 knots here and it's going to be 20 knots here, it's probably 15 knots in the middle. But it does, and the time that you'll see that, probably you'll be able to find a variation in it is when there's a frontal band. So you just be aware of that. But as I say, we've got our all our data in our weather routing. We'll bring this down to 5 days because we know that we'll be outside the grid area that we're looking at within 5 days. I mean, I could even go 4 days. And then I will change my resolution. I'll go to 50 kilometer resolution. So you'll see here that all of a sudden, my estimated file size has come way down. We're going to depart now. So I mean, I can go through and I can actually get rid of some of this stuff as well. But anyway, I can take the cloud, the temperature. I could take the wave grid out, but let's leave it in there so we can have a look at it. And I could drop off some of these models if I wanted to, because we know from what we looked at before that they are generally doing the same sort of thing. They're not. The only one that was diverging was the UKMO, and so we know that all the rest are doing a pretty similar thing. So we could possibly drop a couple of models off, stick with some of our favorites or whatever we want to do. And you'll see here our file size is down to 64 kilobyte. That is an easy download on an Iridium Go or an SSB connection, or basically any SAT connection that can do data. So as I mentioned this before, we've changed our start time to now. We're on weather routing still. We're still getting our GMDSS. So if I turn that on and off, it's a tiny, 3 kilobyte file size. So I click on next. You'll see there that we've got that ocean data turned off. If I turn that back on, the file size goes huge. We can, just on the ocean data, there are ways that you can manipulate that data if you wanted to get it updated. Well, you see, let's say we were at the end of our journey like we were looking at before. We could come in here and we could choose, you'll notice that some of the models are way more data intensive than the others. I think the RTOFS, for instance, from memory, anyway, have a look at it. For the same area, the file sizes are quite vastly different. So you could choose the one that had a smaller file size, and you can actually download a really small area, and you will be able to download that. But we'll look at something like that in a second. It's the same sort of situation as if we were going to download a really big area, but get rid of all the models and a whole lot of parameters. So I'll just click on next. So you'll see here, I've got all my file sizes, and I'll just click on download so that we're not waiting around too long. But I could have chosen my Iridium Go connection because I'm at sea now, so I selected that. And the other thing I would have needed to do was I would have needed to connect to my Iridium Go Wi-Fi. If I was doing an email request, I would have needed to click on email, and then I save that file to my desktop, and then I send it in an email to offshore@predictwind.com as an attachment, and it sends a bunch of attachments back to my email. So that's if you if you're, for whatever reason, you're using an email client or you're on SSB and you have to do it that way. So you'll see here we've downloaded all of our grid data, and our weather routing is still thinking about it. And that's because it is doing, it is literally a billion calculations, looking at every possible scenario, but it's also using that high resolution data. So it's downloaded it now. You see here, I've got all my file sizes. Something that I should have mentioned before was that in here, we can see when these grid files were updated. And so interestingly enough here, I can see, and this is something I didn't know about, is that it doesn't look like the GFS has updated since yesterday. So there's potentially a problem with their output, happens from time to time. So we know that data is actually a bit older. So that's just something to keep in mind. But you'll see here, ECMWF, Spire, UKMO, PWG, they're all updated in my time this morning. But I can see there that the GFS has not updated. That's last night's model run. So we might not put too much weight on that. So generally, if something like that happens, they'll just keep running it until it's resolved, and it will update at some stage, unless they have a major and it doesn't happen until the next model run. So we'll click on close. So we had, what do we have? 64 kilobytes to get all this data. So I mentioned before that we have, this is all our weather routing data. So this is the data that has been crunched on our servers and has used all that high resolution data. So this is now our most accurate data source because we're offshore. And so we've got the wind for across all the models, and all our wind angles, whether we're motoring, all that sort of thing. How are we going for time? Definitely getting on. But we can come in here and we can look at, the wave data and the current, we'll be able to see current data when we enter the Gulf Stream. You know, we'll see that that it speeds up, all that sort of stuff. So you can spend a lot of time in here analyzing this, and I do. And we can also come over here and have a look at our summary. You'll see here we've still got you know, some pretty strong winds in our passage, and so I suspect that'll be at the end of it. So we can flip back over to our map, and you'll see there that our weather route has changed because we've changed our time and our position. So our weather route has changed as to how it wants to deal with the situation. Probably wouldn't have changed that much if we had actually been, you know, done it in sequence as though we were in the real world. But I've gone back a day and I've moved a long way. So we've got that much smaller grid area now, but we can still glean a lot from it. So this is, let's go to our start time. So we've started here, and so in roughly 12 hours time, we are here. In 12 hours time, we would do that same download again. So we would do our weather routing again, and we would change our grid area again, and then we would be able to look at this information. We can come in here and we can look at the different models and the different parameters, you know. I'm back into the wind. I'm looking at the gusts. We can look at the cape. There's no cape in that grid, so I need to change models. We know the GFS is old, so we won't look at that. So we've got the cape in there. We can look at the wave. So this is all this grid data. We downloaded all of this over our satellite connection. It was easily, you know, a nice file size. So we can look at that. The good thing is that it once all the models are, you know, the weather routing across all the models wants us to do the same thing, which is pretty awesome. And we can have a look at all our different parameters. So that was, and so I mentioned before, so we didn't download ocean data. So if I come over here to ocean data, you'll see that because I didn't download it, that data is still there. So we can still analyze, you know, what's going on with the ocean data. You see, you know, we've got all these eddies and stuff down here. And this is great to know because sometimes you'll wonder why the sea state is doing what it's doing. For instance, if we come up here, you know, and we're coming into this piece of water here, and if I go back to weather routing and go back to my wind, you know, you'll see we've got this southerly here, and I go back to my ocean data, and I've got the current heading towards the south. So all of a sudden I'm in a situation where I've got wind against tide, wind against current, and so I could, you know, I could potentially have headed further north to go around it, or not. But at least we know what's going on and what to expect, and you know, pretty valuable information to have while you're out at sea, and to be able to actually see it. So yeah. So anyway, so we can come back to our weather routing tool and have all our stuff there, you know. So once, as I said, we would run our route again here and just keep updating this information. So I think, apart from the fact that my voice is giving up, I've probably talked for long enough at the moment, and I'll get Alex to jump back on. I'll stop sharing my screen and just dismiss a reminder there.
Okay.
And see how we're going. I feel like I've been talking to myself for quite a while.
No, I think we've been all listening. So I'm going to look back through the questions and mention a couple. So while I know you, so we weren't going to talk much about polars, Jim Otten had the question. He says, look, I've got a custom boat. How do you sort out the correct polars? Could you
Yep.
add a comment or two about that?
Yes, certainly can. So actually, let's go and look at it, because okay, so we can come in here to we could do that from departure planning or weather routing, but so we can come in here to routing preferences. So if you've got a custom boat, there is a few ways you can do it. You could actually get the polars from the designer. Your designer will have polars, or, and you know, and then you can actually come in here and you can import a polar. So if I went over to advanced, see here, I could import the polar. It needs to be in a .text or .pol file type, so it's a table. Looks somewhat like this, but a much easier way to do this is to go, okay, you know, I've clicked on this predefined here, and it is highly likely that there is a boat that is has similar performance to your boat. So, you know, whatever it is. So, you know, let's say it's a you know, Beneteau first 47.7, and you know, maybe your custom boat is similar to that. You just know that the speed is similar, but you know, it's not quite the same. But so anyway, we've got a polar there, and we're like, okay, well, that's something to start from. My boat isn't quite so fast upwind as that, and so I can come in here. I've got that polar selected, and then I can go copy to advanced polar. So I push that button there, and then I click over on the advanced button, and you'll see here I have this somewhat complex table, and down this column here are my wind speeds. I mean, personally, I think this is too detailed. I can drop some of these out. So 4 knots, 6 knots, 8 knots. Do I really need to have all of those there? I can come through and I can click on the minus button and get rid of some of them, and you know, try and simplify this table a bit. So we've now cut down our wind speeds. We've got, you know, up to 30 knots, still, you know, plenty of variation there. And then I come across here, and we often have these 2 blank columns. They don't actually need to be there, but anyway, we do. That's our 0. So, and then here we have TWA1. So this is our true wind angle. So this is the highest that we can basically sail upwind. You might go, my boat doesn't sail at 41 degrees, you know, so you can come in here and you can change this to 48, and you can change these settings. You know, so then we've got, so that's our highest true wind angle. Your boat might sail at 55, so you can change that initial one there to 55. You'll see here we then, and so in 4 knots, I mean, let's do 10 knots. So at 10 knots at a true wind angle of 48 degrees, does my boat do 6.95 knots? I don't know whether your boat does. That's pretty fast, if you ask me. I've actually sailed against one of these boats in a race, and I do know they actually go pretty quick, upwind, not downwind. Anyway, so we could come in here and we could adjust these, and so you can, you know, spend some time getting this to fit your boat. It does not need to have 48 then 50. So if I click on that minus, I can get rid of the 50. Do I need 60? Yeah, well, let's leave it in there. Do I need 70? No. Do I need 75? No. You know, so I can actually then, all of a sudden, I've got my target upwind, I've got 60-degree true wind angle, and then I've got this other column here, which is sort of my tight reaching column, you know, my 90 to 110 degrees column, and I can scroll this across, and, you know, I've got another one here, which is, you know, let's get rid of that one. We don't need him. And then we've got, you know, this 120 to 135. You know, that's good. We might have a spinnaker up. You know, we might be sort of, you know, pretty tight with a kite on. Well, not tight, but, you know, you're not running flat. And then we've got our 150 angle. So, you know, we might come in here and we might keep these, you know, we might sail our boat, you know, with our, you know, poled out. We might actually sail at 180. You know, we might have a jib poled out and our main out and actually just head dead downwind, especially if you have a cat. I know lots of cruisers like to do that. You can set it up. So that's how you deal with it. As I say, feel free to get rid of the complications here. It does not need to be, you know, 15 columns and 20 rows. It can be, you know, 6 columns and, you know, 8 rows or 5 rows or whatever you want to do. But anyway, that's how you can change your polar, play around with it, make it fit to your boat. What you would do once you've done that is that you'd come up here and you click on weather routing and you would calculate your route. And then, oh, I've done something wrong with my wave polars and I know what it is. Just disable that. And I'll click on download and I will get, this is now going to calculate my route for those polars that I just changed and set up. So that is one way to set your custom polars. We're actually developing a tool at the moment with a little product that we just released called a data hub. The data hub is going to log all the data from your NMEA. So if you have, you know, obviously your speed, your true wind angle, the wind speed, and it's going to gather all that data, and then you're going to be able to put that data from your boat into a little tool, and it's going to give you a polar. So it'll be the actual, you can get a data hub now, but the polar generation part isn't quite ready, but we're getting there with that. So that's in the future, another way to look at developing your own polars. But personally, basically what we've just done is something that's how I've always done it for boats that I sail on. So we've run that route and then we changed some of those numbers around, right? So then we want to come in here to the tables and go to this tab here, this wind tab, and actually look at, you know, true wind speed 13.1 knots, true wind angle 139, speed over ground 8.2 knots. Sounds pretty reasonable to me. So yeah, this is where I can come and check that those changes that I've made in my polar, do they fit with my boat? And you can go back and, you know, change it again. You can go back into the routing preferences and have another go. So you see this curve, this here over here, this is our polar curve. So if this starts doing really funky ins and outs, means you've probably changed something you shouldn't have, or you know, gone too far. And so you'd want to look for where that anomaly is in your polars. And but again, it is something that our support team can help you with and are happy to help you with. Okay,
one question. After you changed those polars, did you have to save anything?
No, I don't. No. Yeah, I mean, I always like to run a route. That's actually what you used to have to do, but I don't believe that you do anymore. But I would, if I ever change my polars, I would always go and run a route to make sure I haven't made a mistake, you know, because it will throw an error up if you've made a mistake in there. So I would always go and run a route, and then you know that it's in the system, but no, you don't actually have to save it. There's not a save button.
And then there were two other questions related to polars. One was, do both the offshore and the original PredictWind use the same method to enter polars?
So Uh, so yes and no. So you cannot change your advanced polars in the offshore app. You can change predefined. So you can select a different boat and change your predefined. You cannot change your advanced polars like we just did in the offshore app. You can change your polar percentage. So that's, so we have our polar that we set up just then, and which we would call our base polar. And so we can then change the percentage of it, which I mentioned, I had it set at 90% for night. So we can scale our polar, but we can't actually manipulate the advanced polar like we just did. So you need to do that manipulation, you need to be in the PredictWind app or the PredictWind forecast website. You cannot do that advanced polar manipulation in the offshore app.
Okay, so then there was another question following up on that one, which was if you entered, let's say you made your modifications in the advanced polars with the original, the desktop
Yep.
version, and then you exported those, could you then transfer those to the offshore app?
You don't need to. So it's when you make those changes. So I just did those in my account, right? So it knows that it's Nick Olson and I've got, my, what do we have? A first 47. And it knows that they're my polars. So that's in my Nick Olson PredictWind account. It knows that that's who I am. In the offshore app, you have to put in your PredictWind login credentials so it knows who you are. So when I do my weather route in the offshore app, it says, oh, it's Nick, and oh yeah, these are his polars. So
Okay.
yeah, so you don't need to transfer them across. It automatically is transferring across. And just on that, if you do have the offshore app open, you need to close it and then open again if you're doing that, if you want them to actually, the request will sync, but if you changed your polars, you need to shut it and then open it for it to sync.
Okay. And then can you explain what CAPE is?
Yes.
Somebody gave the definition, but there's another part to the question. Let me just find it. How is CAPE index read and translated into possible threats? So that's where we're going.
It's a good question. We do have a quite a good article on CAPE in our news section because it was a feature, a parameter we added in a while ago, and it's been a really big one for for everyone. How do we? So the interesting thing with CAPE is that it changes depending on where you are in the world. So, for instance, where I am, we might get a CAPE level of 200 kilojoules, I think is the unit, and that would actually be quite a lot. So if I get if I get any frontal band coming through here in New Zealand, and it has any level of CAPE in it, I know it's going to be it's going to be a pretty hard front. It's going to give us a good bang. Up in the Caribbean and in the US, where you guys are, you get much higher levels, and basically it is a moving scale. And I guess it's something that you need to adapt to where you are, but you'll get 2,000, 3,000, and you'll just, the higher the levels, the more the volatility. So it's CAPE is convective available potential energy. It's the amount of energy in the atmosphere. It is not just isolated to frontal bands. I talk about that because obviously when I'm at sea and there's a frontal band, I want to look at that and see if it's going to be a nasty front. It's an indicator for me that that's going to be a nasty one. But you will just get areas where there is higher levels of CAPE, and that's just it's an indicator of that you're going to go. You might be heading into an area where there's going to be thunderstorms. So for sailors, that's could you potentially avoid that area? Like if we're looking at our weather routing, we're looking 5 days in advance. Could we change our course to avoid a large area? It is quite a coarse tool. So, it can move around, but do we want to avoid, can we avoid that area? If we're not, if it's just, we know that we're going to sail through that on this day or this night, we might just sail our boat in a way that we're more conservative, we're prepared to, as in we might sail with less sail, or we're prepared to reduce sail quickly, because you get hit, your thunderstorms are not going to show up in gribs. So, but the Cape is giving you an indication that there's potential for that to happen. So, you see some dark clouds rolling towards you. You've seen in your planning that there was elevated Cape levels, and so you can then be prepared. And you might, if you see those dark clouds rolling towards you, you might know anyway, but it's time to reduce your sail or whatever, however it is that you want to handle that situation. But that's really what it's about. And as I say, levels are different everywhere in the world, depending on how close to the equator you are. Obviously, the closer you are, the higher they get. But it's a relative scale. So you'll quickly learn, if you use that parameter, what you're looking for. But essentially, any levels are worth taking note of.
Okay. Is a professional subscription required for ocean currents?
So the weather routing will always use ocean currents. To visualize the gribs, you do need a professional subscription.
Okay. And then we had another question. Do you usually use the export route function after each run while underway and then load that to a chart plotter or iNavX on an iPad?
Yeah, 100% you can. That's what it's there for. I personally would, how I do it is I look for key waypoints. And so what I mean by that is, you can see in those weather routes that we ran, we weren't really changing. There wasn't a lot of change at times. If there was going to be a change, I might just put some key waypoints in. So I'm going to head to here. And what I mean by that is at 6 hours, 12 hours, and 24. Depends how so you could actually manually enter those, if you did 3. If you are going to transfer it across to something, if you're using your tablet and you are going to transfer it across that, then yeah, you can select the route and export it. So it all depends how you want to use the tools.
Okay. Okay, I think so. There was another question about professional version to get the detailed weather routing information. So it's just, I guess, yes, for the purposes of visualization.
Yes, yeah, and it's calculating it in whether you're on standard or pro, but to see it, you need to have the pro. Personally, where you guys are in the world, it would be a very easy decision for me. I would want to see those currents.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
It is of any place in the world, it would be my number one of where I would want to see. So yeah.
Totally agree, having lived through some mess ups in the Gulf Stream. All right, any other questions from the audience? Looks pretty quiet. Well, Nick, thank you very much. This is a really informative discussion, and hopefully we will be able to figure this out on our own.
Yeah, as I say, please reach out to our support team. They're awesome. They've done this passage and many others in this area. Lots of times, one of our guys is a delivery skipper that's done it a lot of times. So they're sailors, they know what they're talking about. Definitely ask them.
Okay, just for everyone's notification, this is being recorded, and the replay will be available probably in a day or two. Normally, we get it up the same day, but with Barb being on vacation, it's a little bit slower, but it will be available so you can go back and review everything that Nick did. And with that, I'm gonna stop the recording. I think if I can, there we go.